This is our final foundational document. It's actually number 9 out of the 9 you have to know for AP Government. And remember, these are critically important because you're going to have to do an argumentative essay, and you have to know the 9 of them because you're going to have to write about some of them. And it's very possible that because Unit 3 is part of the amended test this year, that you could get letter from Birmingham jail as a possibility. So we're looking here at letter from Birmingham jail written April 16th, 1963 by Martin Luther King Jr. Little bit of background. Birmingham had become the center of the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King Jr. Was there doing sit-ins, doing protests. We call this direct action, where you go out, you take action. They would go and disrupt businesses, try to sit in places where white people were only supposed to sit. They would do demonstrations. They would do protest marches. And a judge in Birmingham said you couldn't do this. And then Martin Luther King Jr. gets arrested. While he's in jail, a group of white clergymen from different churches wrote a letter called A Call to Unity. And they criticized Martin Luther King Jr. and they said he really should just wait. Wait, let us discuss this. And then we'll get to rights. We'll get to the rights, but it's going to take some time. And so he needs to stop this direct action because it's just too disruptive. Martin Luther King Jr. Reads the newspaper while he's in prison, and he ends up writing in the margins at first. He actually wrote in the margins. He started this response to them. And then eventually he gets some paper and from a lawyer and a couple prison guards smuggled some stuff to him. And he ends up writing out this proper letter. This is an obviously heavily edited version, just to kind of give you an idea about what this is. But I encourage you to look it up and read the whole thing. I just left out maybe some examples of things that he goes into. But this is the essence of his ideas for civil rights and in the civil rights movement. So this is really great. I love this letter. All right, so let's start. You're going to have this on Google Docs, so you can have a copy of your own and you can highlight it as you go. If you want, you can print it and then go ahead and write in the margins or use a highlighter. That's fine. We won't have a lot of markups. Just want to get the main idea here. All right, so my dear fellow clergymen, we have waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park, has just been advertised on television, and to see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky. When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you, when you are humiliated all day in and day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. All right, so let's just highlight a couple things and talk about it. So here's a big section here. He goes through and he lists a bunch of things that are injustices. He lists injustices. Can't wait because these things are happening now. And I love his comment here. Hey, when you haven't felt the stinging darts of segregation, maybe easy to say wait. But you know what? We're not going to say wait because I'm dealing with this daily. We can't even go to Funtown. You know what I'm saying? That's interesting too because there was a place called Funtown near me where I grew up in Maine. But anyway, so yeah, this is pretty hardcore stuff. Like he's saying, look, I'm not waiting. And then he switches gears and he talks about something else. You express a great deal of anxiety over our willingness to break laws. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and disobeying others or obeying others? So basically saying like, hey, look, you're being a hypocrite because you're saying these laws are bad, but then you obey other laws. So if you just act the way you are, then we're going to have lawlessness. And then he says, the answer lies in the fact there are two types of laws, just and unjust. And I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. One has not only a legal, but a moral responsibility to obey a just law. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. So here's the fact. They're doing this disobeying. Let me get down here. Disobeying laws because these laws unjust. That's why he's disobeying laws. That's why they're doing the sit-ins. That's why they're maybe violating perhaps some property rights by going in and sitting in places that they're not supposed to sit. Because look, this is a violation of justice. It's unjust. So an unjust law is no law at all. He quotes Saint Augustine. All right, great. Let's go down here. Let's consider a concrete example of just and unjust laws. An unjust law is a code that is a numerical or power majority. Talking here about whites group compels a minority group to obey, but doesn't make it binding on itself. A law is unjust if it is inflicted on a minority that, as a result of being denied the right to vote, had no part in enacting or devising the law. Exactly the case in Alabama. So who can say that the legislature of Alabama, which set up the state's segregation laws, was democratically elected? Throughout Alabama, all sorts of devious methods are used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. And there are some counties in which, even though Negroes constitute a majority of the population, not a single Negro is registered. Can any law enacted under such circumstances be considered democratically structured? So then he goes another level. Like, you want to talk about unjust laws? Like, all these segregation laws are unjust because Alabama hasn't allowed African Americans to vote. All right, so just kind of hit through here, and over to the side. I'll scroll down a little bit for you. African Americans can't vote. Therefore, these laws are unjust. Remember what he said earlier. What should you do with an unjust law? Not obey it. So he's making like a logical argument here, making a very logical argument. These laws are unjust. Therefore, we don't have to obey them. They're unjust because African Americans haven't been allowed to vote, from all sorts of devious methods. He always says that, all sorts of devious methods, poll taxes, things like that. All right, let's finish up right here. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself, and that is what's happened to the American Negro. So let him march, let him go on freedom rides, and try to understand why he must do so. I have tried to say that this normal and healthy discontent can be channeled into creative outlet of non-violent direct action. Basically, the white people were scared that this was going to become violent. And Martin Luther King Jr. is saying, look, you're not going to keep us oppressed forever. That's just not the way it works. He goes, but I am saying it can be non-violent direct action. We're not hurting anybody. Okay, let's continue. And now this approach is being termed extremist. But though I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. And then here he starts appealing to things that would appeal to the white people, but also just appeal to Americans in general. Like these are the things that were common culture that people would understand. So this is a brilliant references to things that would appeal specifically to these pastors, but in general, Americans in general. So he says, was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. I mean, think about that. You're supposed to love people that hate you. You're supposed to love people that persecute you. You're supposed to pray for people that do bad things for you. That's extremist. So he's like, just a brilliant point. Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel? I bear in my body the marks of Lord Jesus, Paul said. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise, so help me God. And Martin Luther, they tried to kill him because he said those things back in the 1500s. And Abraham Lincoln said, this nation cannot survive half slave and half free. And Thomas Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Now think about what he's doing here. So let's see, he's quoting Jesus, right? So he goes to the Bible. He's appealing to um, these people. He's appealing to these people with the Bible. So let me go ahead and get that. So appeals from Bible. And then he keeps going. He appeals, he quotes Lincoln, quotes Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, he did a lot. Um, he does a lot of this where he quotes, famous documents and people like Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King Jr. wanted the promise of America to finally be lived out. He was someone who loved the Declaration of Independence because it was the thing that spoke to the fact that African Americans should have equal rights. So the question is not whether we be extremists. What kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? Great. So now you're going to go ahead and grab this letter from Birmingham jail right here. And we're going to go ahead and put notes on this. You can go and print this out. You can do it on computer. I would recommend printing it out, or just take a piece of paper, write letter from Birmingham jail, required document number 9, and then go ahead and put the notes on it with bullet points. That's fine. You can take a picture of it, upload it, and that's great. All right, let's go through the main points here for letter from Birmingham jail. All right, so first off, letter from Birmingham jail. This is all right. So first off, Martin Luther King Jr., 1963. He's the one writing it. His response to 8 Alabama clergymen who told him to wait. They told him to wait. And his reaction was, look, I can't wait. All these bad things are happening. My child can't go to Funtown. And so direct action is needed. We need to do sit-ins. We need to do marches. We need to do freedom rides. We're going to take action, all right? And his idea behind this was they wanted to create a nonviolent tension and crisis. So that way negotiations would start. See, his point was to these clergymen, look, you guys are telling us to wait. We need to do this tension. We need to create tension with these protest marches and these sit-ins. So that way we will have negotiations. That way the legislature will do something. If we don't do something, they're not going to do anything. We're going to have it change. And then he says, so wait? You're telling us to wait? No way. We're not waiting. Why aren't we going to wait? Because there are lynchings, there are abuse, there's poverty among African Americans. No fun town. We can't go to hotels. There's all these colored signs. We're not going to wait. Do you understand me? We're not waiting. Why? Because this is happening right now. So that's his kind of point. It's very powerful. And then he gets into the second part there that we looked at, just versus unjust laws. And he's saying, like, there are laws that are just. We don't have to obey the unjust laws. And he says the reason there's unjust laws is because Alabama, the state of Alabama, is making laws, and no blacks are registered to vote. This is not democratic, and it's unjust. Alabama's making laws. No blacks are registered to vote. It's not democratic. So the state is not protecting civil rights here. And then he makes the point that the oppressed cannot remain oppressed forever. Like, you better deal with us now. I'm working on nonviolent stuff. That's what I'm doing. But who knows what the future may hold? You need to deal with the oppressed and you need to give them rights. And then lastly, in order to appeal to the American population, and I think he was genuine about it. I think he loved America for sure, but he uses examples of the Bible. He quotes Abraham Lincoln, who's widely considered probably our greatest president. And then also Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. And it's really common, by the way. Martin Luther King Jr. often quoted all men are created equal from the Declaration of Independence because he believed in it and he knew it was the driving force behind making sure the promise of America was true for African Americans as well. All right, cool. This is it for this lesson. Make sure you get this. Make sure you study it. There's practices for it. Thanks.